Então, boa tarde, pastor.
Boa tarde, mas eu não estou sabendo onde você está. Ah, pronto, sim, agora sim.
Então, a minha pergunta é sobre Ezequias. Ezequias, ele estava predestinado a morrer. Ele estava com uma doença. E ele pediu a Deus mais alguns anos de vida, e Deus deu mais 15 anos de vida para ele. E ele teve um filho, e esse filho foi muito ruim. Tipo, ele matava, ele queimava as pessoas. Aí a minha pergunta é, por que Deus permitiu que ele tivesse esses 15 anos de vida e permitiu que ele tivesse esse filho, se esse filho é ruim e Deus sabe de tudo do futuro?
Essa pergunta é análoga a uma série de outras que podíamos fazer. Por que Deus permitiu Adolf Hitler nascer, sabendo que ele ia praticar o mal e matar 6 milhões de judeus? Por que Deus permitiu tantas coisas? Eu acho que Deus permitiu desde lá de trás, quando alguém podia perguntar por que ele permitiu criar Lúcifer, sendo que Lúcifer viraria Satanás. Eu respondo com alguns elementos para você. Letra A, porque Deus não duela com o seu caráter. Quando Deus diz na Bíblia que Ele nos dá o livre arbítrio, ou seja, Ele nos dá o poder de escolha, isso tem que ser real. Eu vou explicar o que eu quero dizer para vocês. Vamos supor que eu vá dar aulas aqui no IPAI, e eu chego no primeiro dia de aula, digo para os alunos assim, olha, vocês podem escolher se querem fazer matéria comigo ou não, se eu sou um bom professor ou não. Vocês vão me dar 0 ou 10. Uau, não tem nem 7, nem 0 ou 10. E eu prometo a vocês que todas as notas que vocês me darem, eu vou levar até o professor Elias, para que ele saiba o que vocês pensam a meu respeito. A princípio os alunos pensaram assim, uau, esse camarada, ele é muito autoconfiante, porque ele deixa os alunos dizerem no papel o que dizem, o que acham dele ou não, e promete que vai levar para o diretor da escola. Aí cada um começa a dar a sua nota lá, 0, 10, 0, 10. Até que depois eu pego aqueles papéis todos e vou para a sala do diretor. Só que nesse ínterim, eu passo na minha casa. E lá eu começo a separar as notas. Que bom, já comecei bem, me deu 10. Outro 10. E um 0 aqui, né? Tudo bem, deixa eu colocar aqui do lado. Outro 0. Opa, nota 10. Outro 0. Outro 10. 0, 0, 0. 0, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8 zeros. Finalmente um 10. E depois que eu separo em duas pilhas os zeros e os 10, sabe o que eu faço? Eu pego as notas 0, jogo no incinerador, queimo tudo. E as notas 10 eu levo para o professor Elias. Que impressão o professor Elias vai ter? Que 100% dos alunos me aprovam. Mas isso é uma grande mentira, porque houve muitos que não me aprovaram, mas esse simplesmente eu destruí. Da mesma maneira, Deus faria se Ele só deixasse vir à existência aqueles que não fossem rejeitar o seu governo. Se Deus não permitisse que Lúcifer viesse à existência, porque ele iria rejeitar o seu governo. Se Deus não permitisse que o filho de Ezequias viesse, porque ele rejeitaria o seu governo, Deus estaria fazendo a mesma coisa que eu. Ele diria para nós assim, vocês têm o livre-arbítrio para me escolher ou não, mas na verdade, só nasceria quem não iria rejeitá-lo. Então o livre-arbítrio seria uma mentira. E Deus não duela com o caráter dele. Se ele dá o livre-arbítrio, ele é real. Nascem pessoas que ele sabe que vão rejeitá-lo e pessoas que ele sabe que vão aceitá-los, mas ele não tira o nascimento daqueles que vão rejeitá-lo, porque o livre-arbítrio é real. Mas ao mesmo tempo que alguém me pergunta, tá, mas e a dor que essas pessoas que o rejeitam provocam, como Hitler? Eu pergunto de volta, quem pagou o maior preço? Foi Cristo. Porque todos esses que sofreram na mão de Hitler ou de qualquer outro inimigo da verdade de Deus, o sofrimento deles durou essa vida, e na manhã da ressurreição, eles vão ressuscitar sem nenhuma cicatriz das marcas do pecado. O único que vai ficar para toda a eternidade com cicatrizes do pecado na sua mão é Cristo. E retido no corpo humano por amor de nós. Por isso Deus não impede o nascimento. Mas quando nós perguntamos por que Ele permite, quem pagou o maior preço? Foi Ele. Espero ter ajudado aí.
This question is for Rabbi. You mentioned the story of that, I think you said he was Jewish and he was shot by, I think it was a concentration camp or something like that. And I'm going to play the devil's advocate for a bit and pretend I'm Sam Harris, no pun intended, of course. You stated that God was watching. God watched the gentleman pull the trigger. if God was watching, why didn't he make that trigger not work? Why didn't he make that poor individual just pass out while he was digging the grave? I believe Sam Harris would ask that type of question and demand an answer.
Yes, I appreciate that question. Playing the devil's advocate, you said that why didn't God keep the man from pulling the trigger rather than allowing the man to pull the trigger and then watch over him and bringing about some kind of judgment? I would say this to you, that the supreme ethic that God has given to us is the ethic of love. It is the peak of all intellectual and emotional alignment. This thing we call love, which places value upon the other person of worth and as something to be protected. It was interesting, of all people, it was Oscar Wilde who on his deathbed in his 40s, by his lover by his side, Robbie Ross, he turned to Robbie and he said, "Did you love any one of those little boys for their own sake?" It was an incredible question to ask by a man who was a hedonist on his deathbed in his 40s. And he said, "Robbie, did you ever love any one of those little boys for their own sake?" And Robbie Ross said, "No, I can't say I did." He said, "Bring me a minister. Bring me a minister." And it was in his magnificent poem, The Ballad of Reading Gaol, that Oscar Wilde said, "Only Christ was big enough to cleanse his heart and forgive him for all that he had done." The point even the hedonist realized was that in pleasure also, value and love are the supreme ethics that can be treasured. But you can never have love without intrinsically weaving into it the freedom of the will. You cannot have love without the freedom of the will. If you are compelled by some machine to a certain decision, you can never love. You can comply, but you will never be choosing to express that sentiment and the reality of love. If love is the supreme ethic, and freedom is indispensable to love, and God's supreme goal for you and for me is that we will love him with all of our hearts and love our neighbors as ourselves, for him to violate our free will would be to violate that which is a necessary component so that love can flourish and love can be expressed. If you're asking for God to always stop the trigger, why not God stop everything else? Next time you hold a cup of boiling water, he makes it frozen water instead. Next time you're about to cross the street and you're going to be hit, he pulls your leg back. What you're asking for is a different entity than humanity. As wonderful as it may seem that in stopping that you think he is protecting you from that which is destructive, the greatest denial that you're asking for is the freedom of your will to be able to choose and to love God with all your heart and all your soul. When you've got love as the supreme ethic and the freedom of the will to choose that love, all of the other contingencies come in and can become explained why it is possible to either choose or to reject so that love can ultimately reign supreme. If you want compliance and some kind of a mechanical response, your question itself will self-destruct. You're asking the question because you're free to ask it, and you're free to ask it because you're free to love. And when you love him, in spite of all of the contraries that you see around us, you're trusting him for having the supreme wisdom and the knowledge to ultimately bring a pattern out of it all. We think, for example, we know so much. The story is told in Mideastern folklore of this man who lost his horse that ran away. And when the horse ran away, the neighbor came to him and said, "You know, bad luck, isn't it? Your horse is gone." He said, "What do I know about these things?" A few days later, the horse came back with 20 other wild horses. And the neighbor came and said, "Amazing, it's not bad luck, it's good luck. You've got 20 more." Man says, "What do I know about these things?" His young son is going and taming one of the new horses. That young horse kicks him and breaks his leg. The neighbor comes and says, terrible, isn't it? Your son's leg is broken. Bad luck that these horses came. The fellow says, what do I know about good luck and bad luck? A few days go by and a bunch of thugs are coming looking for recruits to join their gang. And they're looking for all the able-bodied young men. And they're about to pick this young man but find out his leg is broken. And they say, we don't want him. We're going to move on to the next house. So the man comes and says, good luck, isn't it? Your son's leg was broken. In one little series of episodes, we don't know what lies ahead. Why don't you wait till you stand before God face to face, and you will find out there were reasons why he didn't stop that trigger, so that you will see the heinousness of evil and see the majesty of love and good managing to navigate yourself but as the pilgrim's progress to come to the celestial city.
Forgive these questions. In a perfect world, I wouldn't have to ask them. But if God is all good and all-powerful and all-knowing, why does he allow bad things to happen to good people?
This is, I think, the principal argument for the atheistic side that my opponents in the debates will sometimes bring up. And I think that there's a couple of ways to respond to this. First, we need to understand what the atheist is claiming here. Is he arguing that God and suffering are logically incompatible with each other? If he is, then he needs to show that there's some sort of implicit contradiction there, because there's no explicit contradiction. And I would say that no atheist has ever been able to sustain that burden of proof, to show that there are necessarily true assumptions that would reveal some kind of a contradiction between God and the suffering and evil in the world. In fact, I think we can prove that they are compatible by just adding a third proposition, and that would be that God has morally sufficient reasons for permitting the evil and suffering in the world. As long as that's even possible, it shows that God and evil are logically compatible. So that logical version of the argument doesn't work. Now, very quickly, there's a probabilistic version of the argument which says, all right, God and evil are logically compatible, but nevertheless, it's highly improbable that God exists, given the evil and suffering in the world. And I think there's a number of moves that the theist can make in response to that argument to show that it's not improbable that God exists, given the suffering in the world.
I happen to believe, I'm going to try and be as objective as I can throughout the debate, that the reasons why there is suffering and pain are entirely obvious, and in fact they're inevitable if there is a loving God. But how would you explain them? Why then does God have to allow discomfort, suffering, pain, terrible pain sometimes to exist?
Well, I would say, Michael, that there isn't any single reason. Rather, there's a multitude of reasons that would be in play here. One would be that God wants to create a world of free creatures who can become responsible moral agents and mature persons. And that will require a world that operates according to certain natural laws, where the fire that warms you can also burn you, the water that sustains you can drown you. And it would require the ability of these creatures to do morally evil acts. And so creating that sort of an arena, I think, is going to allow the possibility of natural suffering and moral evil to occur. But that God permits these with the overall goal in mind of bringing people freely into a knowledge of himself and to eternal salvation. And the goal of human life is not happiness in this life. We are not God's pets. His goal is not to create a nice terrarium here for his human pets. Rather, it is to bring persons into communion with himself forever, freely. And in order to do that, it's not at all implausible that a world suffused with natural and moral evil would be the correlative of that.
Okay.